The single father had only one plate of beans for himself and his little daughter, yet every time he lifted the spoon, he quietly pushed the larger share toward her. Clara Westbrook stopped in the middle of the wooden boardwalk and watched. The afternoon sun burned over Dry Creek, Colorado in the summer of 1876. Dust moved across the street in pale clouds. Horses stood beneath the shade of the saloon roof. Wagon wheels groaned over the hard ground, and somewhere beyond the buildings, a train whistle cried across the open plains. Clara wore a dark green traveling dress with fine black buttons. Her gloves were soft leather, and a small gold pin rested at her throat. Everyone who saw her could tell she was wealthy. But no one could see how lonely she was. She had enough money to buy every shop along the main street. She owned land, railroad shares, and a large house in Denver with rooms she never entered. Servants prepared meals she barely touched. Businessmen bowed when she walked past them. Yet none of that had given her the feeling she saw at the small table before her. The man sitting there was about 35. He had broad shoulders, rough brown hair, and a short beard darkened with dust. His faded gray shirt was rolled above his elbows. His hands were scarred and stained with black marks from years of work. Beside him sat a small girl of 7. Her name, Clara would soon learn, was Annie. The child wore a faded yellow dress with patches at both elbows. Her brown hair was tied with a thin blue ribbon. She looked tired, but each time her father gave her another spoonful, she smiled at him as though he had placed a feast before her. The man took one small bite. Then he gave the spoon back to Annie. "You eat it," he said softly. "But you're hungry too, Pa." "I ate earlier." The child looked at him with doubt. Even she knew it was not true. The father broke a piece of dry bread in half. He gave Annie the soft middle and kept the hard edge for himself. Clara felt something tighten inside her chest. She remembered her own father doing the same thing many years ago, before money had entered their lives. Before fine dresses, city dinners, and men who spoke more about profit than people. Her father had once been a simple farmer in Missouri. During hard winters, he would tell Clara he was not hungry, even when she heard his stomach growl. She had not thought about those days in years. Annie noticed Clara first. The girl stopped chewing and stared at her expensive dress. Then she looked at the empty chair beside the table. Her father followed her eyes and turned. His gaze was calm and direct. He did not smile at Clara's wealth. He did not lower his head. He simply looked at her as though she were another traveler standing beneath the hot sun. Clara placed one gloved hand on the back of the empty chair. "Can I sit with you?" she asked. The man glanced at the chair, then back at her. "It belongs to the eating house," he said, "but I reckon they won't mind." Clara almost smiled. "I was asking you." Something changed in his eyes. He studied her face more carefully. Perhaps he saw the sadness she tried to hide. "You're welcome to sit," he said. Clara pulled the chair out and lowered herself beside them. Annie leaned close to her father and whispered, "Is she a queen?" Her whisper was loud enough for Clara to hear. The father cleared his throat. "Annie." Clara laughed softly. It was the first real laugh that had escaped her in months. "No," she said, "I am only a woman who does not wish to eat alone." The little girl smiled. Her father pushed the plate slightly toward the middle of the table. "We don't have much," he said, "but we can share." Clara looked at the thin beans and the 2 pieces of bread. She knew at once that this was probably their only meal that day. "My name is Clara," she said. The man nodded. "Nathan Cole." He rested one rough hand on the girl's shoulder. "This is my daughter, Annie." Clara did not give her last name. The name Westbrook carried too much weight. Her late husband had owned freight companies, mines, and warehouses across 3 states. Since his death, Clara had managed the fortune alone. Most people changed when they heard her full name. Some became overly polite. Others became greedy. Nathan did neither because he did not know who she was. For a few quiet moments, the 3 of them watched the street. A group of cowboys rode past. A shopkeeper swept dust from his doorway, though the wind blew it back at once. Annie carefully picked up every crumb from the table. Nathan watched her with a tired tenderness. "This town is full of men looking for gold," he said. "Most of them never notice what they lose while searching for it." Clara turned toward him. Nathan's gray-blue eyes settled on her face. "You don't look like you came here for gold," he continued. "You look like you already found it and discovered it could not buy back what mattered." The words struck Clara harder than she expected. She lowered her eyes to the table. 3 years earlier, her husband, Charles Westbrook, had died suddenly during a winter journey. He had been a decent man, but their marriage had always felt more like a business agreement than love. After his death, Clara inherited everything. People told her she was fortunate. They never understood that wealth could make a house larger while making a life feel smaller. Before she could answer Nathan, heavy footsteps sounded on the boardwalk. A tall man in a cream-colored suit approached the table. He wore polished boots, a silver watch chain, and a smile Clara knew too well. Victor Hale. He was a railroad investor from Denver. He had spent months trying to convince Clara to marry him. When kindness failed, he used pressure. When pressure failed, he began spreading whispers about her business decisions. "Mrs. Westbrook," Victor said loudly. "What a surprise." Nathan looked at Clara. She saw the moment he understood who she was. Victor stared at the plate of beans, and then at Nathan's worn clothing. "What are you doing here?" he asked Clara. "I am sitting with him." Nathan remained still, but his jaw tightened. Annie moved closer to her father. Victor gave a cold laugh. "This man repairs wagon wheels behind the livery stable. He sleeps in a room barely fit for animals." Nathan placed his hand over Annie's. Clara's face hardened. "You will not speak about him that way." Victor looked surprised. "My concern is for you. People are watching. A woman carrying the Westbrook name should choose her company with care." Clara rose slowly. The boardwalk seemed to grow quiet around them. "Then watch carefully," she said, "because this man offered me a seat without asking what I owned. That already makes him better company than most men I know." Victor's smile disappeared. "You are embarrassing yourself." "No," Clara replied. "I am finally seeing things clearly." Victor looked at Nathan with open disgust. "You should remember your place." Nathan finally stood. He was taller than Victor and much stronger, but he did not raise his voice. "My place is beside my daughter," he said, "and your place is anywhere you choose so long as it is away from her." Victor's face turned red. Clara stepped between them. "Leave, Victor. You will regret this." "The only thing I regret is allowing you to speak for this long." Victor turned sharply and walked away. His boots struck the boards with angry steps. Nathan watched him disappear into the street. Then he looked down at Annie. The child's eyes were frightened. Nathan reached for her hand. "We should go." Clara felt sudden panic. "You do not have to leave." Nathan looked at her fine dress and then toward the direction Victor had gone. "Men like that use people as weapons," he said quietly. "He will use your name to hurt anyone near you. I can bear his words, but Annie has heard enough cruel voices." He lifted his worn hat from the table. "Thank you for being kind to her." Nathan guided Annie away. The girl looked back twice before they vanished into the dusty crowd. Clara remained beside the empty table. The plate of beans was still there. Nathan had left without finishing his meal. Clara reached into her small bag for a handkerchief. Her fingers touched an old folded paper she had carried for 11 years. It was a receipt from the hardest time in her family's life. When Clara was 19, her father's farm had been destroyed by a terrible flood. The river had taken the barn, the crops, and half the house. The bank was ready to seize the remaining land. Then someone paid the debt. The stranger refused to give his name. All Clara's father received was a receipt signed with 2 initials. N.C. Clara had spent years trying to discover who had saved them. As she pulled the paper from her bag, the wind caught it. It slipped from her hand and landed beside the table. She bent quickly and picked it up. For the first time, she noticed a faded mark beneath the initials. It was the small outline of a wagon wheel. Clara's breath caught. Nathan Cole repaired wagons. His initials were NC. She stared down the street where he had disappeared. It could have been a coincidence. It had to be. Nathan could barely afford a plate of beans. He lived behind a stable and wore a shirt repaired more times than she could count. How could a poor single father have paid off a farm debt 11 years earlier? And if Nathan had once possessed that kind of money, what had happened to him? Clara closed her fingers tightly around the receipt. She had come to Dry Creek searching for quiet. Instead, she may have found the man who changed her entire life. Now she had to find him again. Clara spent the night awake in the finest room of the Dry Creek Hotel. The bed was soft, the sheets were clean, and a pitcher of cool water stood beside the window. None of it brought her peace. She kept the old receipt on the table beneath the lamp. NC. The faded wagon wheel mark seemed clearer each time she looked at it. She remembered Nathan's rough hands, Annie's patched yellow dress, and the untouched plate of beans left behind on the boardwalk. The idea made no sense. A man who could not afford supper could not have once saved her father's farm. Yet Clara had learned long ago that truth did not always arrive in a form people expected. At sunrise, she left the hotel. The morning air was cooler, but heat already rested over the distant hills. Clara asked the stable owner where Nathan lived. The old man stopped brushing a chestnut mare and looked at her carefully. Nathan Cole. Yes. He works behind this stable when there is work to be had. Repairs wheels, shoes horses, fixes broken wagon frames. Where does he stay? The stable owner pointed beyond the last buildings in town. There is an abandoned line cabin near Willow Bend. He patched the roof himself, lives there with the girl. Clara thanked him and hired a small carriage. The road out of Dry Creek followed a narrow stream through dry grass and scattered cottonwood trees. The land was quiet except for insects humming in the heat and the creak of the carriage wheels. After nearly an hour, Clara saw the cabin. It stood near the edge of the creek beneath two bent trees. The roof had been repaired with mismatched boards. A small garden struggled beside the porch. Several pieces of broken wagon wood were stacked near a rough workbench. Nathan stood outside, driving a metal band around a damaged wheel. His sleeves were rolled up, sweat darkened the back of his shirt. Each strike of his hammer rang across the clearing. Annie sat on the porch with a piece of charcoal, drawing pictures on a flat board. She saw Clara first. The lady from the table, Annie shouted. Nathan stopped working. His expression became guarded when he noticed the carriage. Clara climbed down without waiting for the driver to help her. Dust settled over the bottom of her green dress as she crossed the yard. You found us, Nathan said. I needed to speak with you. Nathan placed the hammer on the bench. If this is about Victor Hale, you do not owe me an apology. It is not about him. Clara removed the folded receipt from her bag. Nathan's eyes dropped to the paper. For one brief moment, something passed across his face. Recognition. Then it was gone. Clara stepped closer and held it toward him. Do you know what this is? Nathan did not take it. No. You looked at it as though you did. I have seen many old receipts. This one saved my father's farm. Nathan remained silent. Clara unfolded the brittle paper carefully. 11 years ago, after the Missouri River flooded our land, someone paid everything my father owed. The man refused to give his name. He signed only his initials. She pointed to the bottom. NC. Annie stopped drawing. Nathan looked toward the creek. Clara watched the muscles tighten in his jaw. There is also a wagon wheel mark, she continued. You repair wagons, your name is Nathan Cole. A lot of men have those initials. Did you help my father? No. The answer came too quickly. Clara lowered the paper. You are lying. Nathan's eyes returned to hers. You should go back to town. I searched for that stranger for years. You found the wrong man. Then look at me and tell me you have never seen this receipt. Nathan said nothing. The wind moved through the cottonwood leaves. Annie looked from her father to Clara with wide eyes. Finally, Nathan turned toward his daughter. Annie, go inside. But Pa, please. The child gathered her charcoal and slipped through the cabin door. Nathan waited until it closed. Then he leaned both hands against the workbench. I was 24, he said quietly. Clara's heart began to pound. Nathan stared at the broken wagon wheel, as though the past was hidden inside its wood. I had returned from California. I spent 4 years working in a timber camp, then another year carrying supplies to mining settlements. I saved almost every dollar. Clara could barely breathe. You paid the debt. Nathan nodded once. Why? He lifted his eyes. When I was 12, I traveled through Missouri with my mother. She was sick, and we had almost no money. Our wagon broke near your father's land. Clara listened without moving. Most men passed us, Nathan continued. Your father did not. He repaired the wheel, brought my mother into your house, and gave us food. We stayed there 6 days until she was strong enough to travel. Clara remembered her father telling stories about strangers who had stopped at the farm, but she had been young. Their home had always welcomed travelers. Nathan's voice grew softer. The morning we left, your father gave me a small tool kit. He told me a man who knew how to repair what was broken would never be useless. Nathan glanced at the workbench. Those tools gave me my first trade. Years later, I heard about the flood and the bank threatening to take his land. I had money then. He had once helped my mother when no one else cared. Paying the debt seemed like the only decent thing to do. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You never told him. He did not help us for praise. I did not want praise either. What happened to the rest of your savings? Nathan's face changed. The guarded strength in him gave way to old pain. I bought a wagon shop in Cedar Hollow. Business was good. I married a woman named Rebecca. He looked toward the cabin door. She gave me Annie. Clara waited. Nathan picked up a small metal nail and rolled it between his fingers. Rebecca became ill after a hard winter. The doctor said she needed treatment in Denver. I sold the shop, the house, and nearly every tool I owned. His voice broke slightly, but he continued. We reached Denver. The doctors tried. She died 6 weeks later. Clara lowered her eyes. I am sorry. Nathan placed the nail back on the bench. After that, I put what remained in a savings company. I wanted Annie to have something when she grew older. The company failed last year. The owner disappeared. Families across 3 counties lost everything. Clara understood at last. The man before her had not wasted his fortune. He had spent it on gratitude, love, and hope. And now you live here, she said. Nathan looked around the poor clearing. The cabin keeps the rain off most nights. I can work. Annie is safe. She was eating from one plate. Nathan's expression hardened. She eats every day. And you. That is not your concern. It became my concern when you offered to share the only food you had. Nathan stepped away from the bench. I do not want your money, Clara. I did not offer money. You came here because you feel you owe me. I came because I needed the truth. And now you have it. Clara looked at him for a long moment. You saved my father's farm. Everything my family built afterward began with what you did. Your father saved my mother first. That does not make your sacrifice smaller. It was not a sacrifice. You gave away nearly everything you had. Nathan looked toward the cabin. I still had my hands. I knew how to work. Clara felt the wall between them rising again. He believed accepting help would make him less of a man. She understood pride, but she also understood loneliness. Let me do something for Annie, she said. No. A better room, new clothing, school books. No. Nathan. I said no. The cabin door suddenly opened. Annie stood there holding a small wooden box. "Pa," she said, "Miss Clara is crying." Nathan's face softened. Clara quickly wiped her cheek. "I am all right." Annie walked toward her and opened the box. Inside were several small objects, a blue ribbon, 2 buttons, a smooth stone, and a tiny wooden wagon. "My pa made this," Annie said, lifting the toy. "He makes things when he is sad." Nathan looked uncomfortable. Annie placed the little wagon in Clara's hand. "You can keep it." Clara knelt so they were at eye level. "That is precious to you. You looked lonely yesterday." The simple words struck Clara deeply. She closed her fingers around the wooden wagon. "Thank you." Annie smiled. Then the sound of horses came from the road. 3 riders entered the clearing. Victor Hale rode in front. He wore a dark riding coat and a black hat. 2 rough-looking men followed behind him. Nathan moved at once, placing himself between the riders and Annie. Victor dismounted slowly. "I told you she would regret embarrassing me," he said. Clara stood. "What are you doing here?" Victor removed a folded document from inside his coat. "I came on business." He held the paper toward Nathan. "This land belongs to the Western Ridge Company. The company recently purchased every unpaid claim along Willow Bend." Nathan did not take the document. "I have permission from the county to stay here." That permission ended when ownership changed. Victor smiled. "You have 3 days to leave." Annie grabbed Nathan's hand. Clara stepped forward. "You purchased this land because you knew he lived here." Victor looked pleased. "I purchased an opportunity. Nathan Cole sits on the only usable crossing point for the rail spur I intend to build. There is no approved rail spur." "There will be." Victor glanced toward Clara. "Your company owns the freight contracts I need. Marry me, and Nathan may remain here as long as he likes." Nathan's body became still. Clara felt cold anger rise inside her. "You are using a child's home to force me into marriage. I am offering everyone a solution." Nathan moved closer to Victor. "You should leave." One of Victor's men rested his hand near his pistol. Nathan did not move back. Victor smiled. 3 days, Cole. After that, the cabin comes down." He climbed onto his horse. Before turning away, he looked at Clara. "You have until then to decide what matters more, your pride or their home." The riders disappeared down the road. Dust rose behind them and drifted slowly across the clearing. Annie pressed her face against Nathan's side. "Are they taking our house?" Nathan placed a hand on her head. "No one is taking anything today." Clara looked at the poor cabin, the small garden, and the fear in Annie's eyes. Victor believed he had trapped her. He believed wealth gave him the right to control every life around him. But Clara had managed businesses larger than anything Victor owned. She knew contracts, land claims, and railroad law better than he imagined. She also knew men like Victor always hid their worst secrets inside their finest papers. Clara folded the eviction notice and placed it in her bag. Nathan looked at her. "What are you doing?" "Helping." "I told you I do not want your charity." Clara met his eyes. "This is not charity. Victor Hale brought a fight to your door." She looked down the road where the riders had vanished. "Now I am going to finish it." Clara returned to Dry Creek before sunset with Victor's eviction notice folded inside her bag. She went straight to the hotel, changed out of her dusty dress, and covered the small desk in her room with maps, business papers, and county records. For years, men had assumed she understood nothing because she spoke softly and wore fine clothing. They learned too late that Clara Westbrook could find a weakness in a contract faster than most lawyers. She studied Victor's document until the lamp burned low. The Western Ridge Company had purchased several unpaid claims along Willow Bend. Victor's signature appeared at the bottom, but one important page was missing. No private company could remove a family from county land without approval from the Territorial Land Office. Clara sent 3 telegrams before midnight. One went to her attorney in Denver. One went to the railroad board in Pueblo. The last went to a banker who had once investigated Victor Hale's business dealings. The next morning, Clara returned to Nathan's cabin. Nathan was loading tools into the back of an old wagon. Annie carried folded blankets from the house. Clara climbed down from her carriage. "What are you doing?" "Leaving before Victor returns," Nathan answered. "You still have 2 days. I will not let any watchmen tear down the roof over her head." Clara looked at the small girl struggling with a heavy blanket. "Where will you go?" "There is work near Silver Junction." "And a home?" Nathan did not answer. Clara stepped in front of him. "Victor's claim may be false." "Maybe. I have people checking it." Nathan shook his head. "I cannot build Annie's life on a chance." "You built your whole life on doing what was right without knowing what it would cost." "That was different." "No, Nathan, you gave my father help when he had nowhere to turn. Now you are refusing to let anyone stand beside you." His eyes hardened. "I will not become another poor man kept alive by a wealthy woman's pity." Clara felt the words, but she did not step back. "You think this is pity?" Nathan looked away. Clara pulled the tiny wooden wagon from her bag. Annie had given it to her the day before. "I have spent years surrounded by men who wanted my money," Clara said. "You are the first man who wanted nothing from me. You shared your food when you barely had enough for your child. You protected Annie without asking anyone to carry your burden, but strength does not mean walking alone forever." Nathan's face softened, though he remained silent. Clara placed the toy wagon on his workbench. "I am not trying to own your life. I am asking you to let me help defend it." Annie approached them. "Pa, can we stay until tomorrow?" Nathan looked down at her hopeful face. Finally, he nodded. "One more day." The answer Clara needed arrived that afternoon. A railroad messenger rode into Dry Creek carrying sealed documents. Victor had lied about the land claim. His company had purchased only the debts connected to Willow Bend, not the land itself. Worse, the banker discovered that Victor had paid a county clerk to change several dates on the records. Clara walked into the sheriff's office with the documents in her hand. Sheriff Daniel Boone read every page twice. "This is fraud," he said. "It is also attempted theft." The sheriff stood and reached for his hat. "Where is Hale?" They found Victor at the hotel dining room, speaking to 2 railroad investors. He rose when Clara entered. "I knew you would come to your senses." Clara placed the documents on the table. "You do not own Willow Bend." Victor's smile faded. "The papers say otherwise." "The papers you purchased say otherwise. The official territorial records do not." The sheriff stepped into the room behind her. Victor glanced toward the door. Clara continued before he could speak. "You paid a clerk to alter dates. You also claimed approval for a railway line that has never been accepted by the board." The 2 investors moved away from Victor. "You have no proof," he said. Clara placed a signed statement beside the documents. "The clerk confessed this morning." Victor's face turned pale. The sheriff walked forward. "Victor Hale, you are under arrest for fraud, bribery, and attempted theft of county land." Victor stared at Clara with hatred. "You are choosing a wagon repairman over everything your name represents." Clara met his eyes calmly. "My name represents whatever I decide it will." The sheriff placed iron cuffs around Victor's wrists. By evening, all of Dry Creek knew what had happened. Nathan's cabin was safe. But Clara's victory did not bring the peace she expected. 2 days later, Annie became sick. It began with a cough during breakfast. By nightfall, she was burning with fever. Her small body shook beneath the blankets, and every breath sounded weak. Nathan rode into town with Annie wrapped in his coat. Clara saw him enter the hotel carrying her in his arms. His face was white with fear. "The doctor is gone," he said. "He left this morning for a ranch 20 miles north." Clara took control at once. She placed Annie in the coolest room in the hotel and sent riders in 3 directions. One searched for the town doctor. Another carried a telegram to a physician in Denver. The third went to every farm nearby asking for clean water, ice, and medicine. For 3 days, Nathan and Clara remained beside Annie's bed. Nathan held his daughter's hand through the long nights. He spoke to her softly, telling her stories about Rebecca and the home they had once shared. Clara cooled the child's forehead and helped her drink small amounts of water. On the second night, Nathan stood near the window with his head lowered. "I could not save her mother," he whispered. "Now I may lose Annie too." Clara walked to him. "You will not face this alone. I should have given her more. You gave her everything a child truly needs. A broken cabin and an empty plate. A father who always gave her the larger share." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. Clara took his rough hand. "Money can buy medicine, Nathan. It can buy a doctor and a stronger roof, but it cannot buy the love Annie already has." At dawn on the 4th morning, the fever finally began to fall. Annie opened her eyes and looked at Nathan. "Pa." Nathan leaned over her at once. "I am here. Did Miss Clara stay?" Clara moved closer to the bed. "I stayed." Annie gave a weak smile. "Good, I think she belongs with us." Nathan bowed his head and laughed through his tears. When Annie recovered, Clara began preparing to return to Denver. Her business manager had sent several messages demanding her attention. She packed her dresses and closed her account at the hotel. Nathan found her beside the carriage on the morning she planned to leave. Annie stood near him wearing a new blue dress, though Clara had needed to argue for 2 days before Nathan allowed her to buy it. "You are going," Nathan said. "I have matters to settle." "For how long?" Clara looked toward the road. "I do not know." Nathan stepped closer. "I was wrong." Clara turned back to him. "I thought accepting help would make me weak," he said. "The truth is I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of needing someone again." His eyes carried the pain of losing Rebecca. Clara understood. Nathan reached into his pocket and removed the tiny wooden wagon. "You left this on my workbench." "It belongs to Annie." "She says it belongs to you." He placed it in Clara's hand. "She also says there is an empty chair at our table." Clara felt tears rise in her eyes. Nathan took a slow breath. "I cannot offer you a mansion. I cannot offer servants or city parties. Some weeks there may still be only one plate between us." Clara smiled. "I never asked for those things. I can offer you honesty, a home that needs work, a little girl who already loves you." He paused. "And a man who has tried not to love you because he was afraid you would leave." Clara stepped closer. "I spent most of my life in large houses that never felt like home." Nathan touched her cheek carefully. "Then stay." Clara leaned into his hand. "Yes." They married beneath the cottonwood trees at Willow Bend 6 weeks later. The wedding was small. The sheriff attended along with the stable owner, the hotel cook, and several families Nathan had helped over the years. Annie stood beside them holding wildflowers. Clara used part of her fortune to build a proper wagon shop for Nathan. Beside it, she opened a small school and hired a teacher for the children of Dry Creek. She also paid for a medical room where traveling doctors could treat families who had nowhere else to go. Nathan never became comfortable with luxury, and Clara never asked him to. Their home remained simple. It had a wide porch, a strong roof, and a large wooden table. No hungry traveler was ever turned away. Years later, Annie became a doctor. She kept the little wooden wagon on a shelf in her office as a reminder of the day a lonely woman stopped beside one poor meal and asked a simple question. On quiet evenings, Clara and Nathan sat together on the porch while the Colorado sky turned orange and purple. Sometimes Nathan would look at the chair beside him and smile. "Can I sit with you?" Clara would ask, just as she had on the first day. Nathan would reach for her hand. "You never have to ask again." Clara had once believed Nathan saved her family only by paying an old debt. She finally understood that he had saved her twice. The first time, he saved her father's home. The second time, he gave Clara one of her own.